Now, 1 Peter chapter 2. Rid yourselves, therefore, of all malice and all guile, insincerity, envy, and all slander. Like newborn infants, long for the pure, spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow into salvation, if indeed you have tasted that the Lord is good. Come to him, a living stone, though rejected by mortals, yet chosen and precious in God's sight. And like living stones, let yourselves be built into a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. For it stands in Scripture, "See, I am laying in Zion a stone, a cornerstone chosen and precious, and whoever believes in him will not be put to shame. To you then who believe, he is precious. But for those who do not believe, the stone that the builders rejected has become the very head of the corner, and a stone that makes them stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. They stumble because they disobey the word, as they were destined to do. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people, in order that you may proclaim the mighty acts of him who called you out of the darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you receive mercy." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. One of the more significant parts of being human is identity. Identity is the key to understanding ourselves, to understanding our world, and to understanding our place in the world. Identity answers some of our most existential questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose? These are all identity questions, and they're some of the deepest questions that we as human beings wrestle with. Maybe you've spent time wrestling with that question. Maybe you're still wrestling with it. We tend to spend a lot of time and money and energy figuring out our identity, working out how to live into that identity, and discerning how to operate out of that identity. Knowing who we are, knowing how we fit in the world, is an important sense of self, how we understand ourselves. And we can gain our identity either intrinsically or we try to find identity by assuming the identity of what we think people have of us. And so businesses, corporations, and institutions, they need identity too. And so they'll spend millions and millions of dollars hiring firms and consultants to help them clarify and fine-tune their identity. And then they'll spend millions of dollars more on marketing to communicate that identity to resonate with as many people as possible. Don't know your own identity? Buy our stuff, participate with what we do, and you can co-opt ours. If you want to know how that looks, just watch Apple. Apple, I think, has been the king of giving people an identity by having them buy and participate with who they are. Their identity is strong, and so if you don't have an identity, buy our stuff. Own an iPhone, own an iPad, own a Mac, and you can be an Apple person and co-opt our identity. But what happens? What happens when our identity is shattered? When a dramatic change shifts our foundations and throws our identity for a loop? Maybe it's a change in a technological shift that makes you feel obsolete. Just think of the names Radio Shack and Blockbuster or MySpace. Maybe it's a vocational shift. Either you have a change in career or lost a job. And now you're wondering, well, now who am I? Jobs are an important part of our identity. It's the reason why one of the first things that we use to describe someone is what they do. When we first introduce ourselves to a new person, it's usually one of the first questions is, so what do you do for a living? That somehow our job gives us identity. So the loss of that or a significant change in career changes how we see ourselves. Could also be a huge cultural change, either a cultural change by society changing or an individual. So cultural changes like modernism to postmodernism to now post-postmodernism to whatever we're in right now. Those are drastic cultural changes that if you are comfortable in one, you may not be comfortable in the other. Or it could be more individual. It could be a shift that might change your political affiliation. Studies show that our political identity is core to how we understand ourselves. And to go through a change that might lift some values and shift them so that our political affiliation changes, that's a huge identity shift and can leave us a bit reeling or leave those around us reeling about who we are. This is what the first century Christian converts experienced. The people to whom 1 Peter is written, because the Roman Empire, like Apple, was really good at creating identity. Not that I'm comparing Apple and the Roman Empire, although there may be some people that would chafe at that and some people that would really resonate with that. I'll let you decide. But Roman Empire was really good at creating identity. Being a Roman citizen meant something significant. It provided benefits. It provided protection. You could wander from one end of the Roman Empire to the other without fear of being attacked or robbed. It was, in fact, the power of being a Roman citizen was so great that even Paul uses it to his advantage. In Acts chapter 22, 25 to 29, he's about to get flogged, and then he says, he indicates that he's a Roman citizen, and all the soldiers freak out because they're not supposed to do this to Roman citizens. But part of that Roman citizenship, part of being a cultural Roman citizen, is that there were strong roles and places within that identity. So we talked a lot about that last week. So if you remember from last week, the Roman household codes, there were strict roles in society that you played. So you could be a Roman citizen, but that meant fitting into one of those categories and living within that box. And there's a hierarchy to that. So you had masters and husbands at the top, and then wives, children, and then slaves at the bottom. And so wherever you fit, and that doesn't even count all the other hierarchies of aristocrats and the regular people, the plebes and wealthy merchants and small business merchants and the poor and needy. But there were all these categories that everybody had to find the box they fit in and stay in that box. And so that gave them their identity. The culture of the Roman Empire told them, this is who you are, for better or worse. But now these Roman citizens are now converting to Christianity. And that conversion is challenging their Roman identity. Because Christianity has different values. It had different attitudes, perspectives, goals. So now this whole group of people that have been converted to following Jesus, their allegiance has changed, and they're pursuing different ends, different goals than they were before. than the rest of the culture around them is pursuing. And so what they were and who they are now, what and who are they now if they're no longer true Roman citizens? Even if they are still legally, they're not culturally. Now, maybe you can identify with them. Maybe you can identify that. Maybe changing your allegiance to Christ alienated you from family and friends. Maybe you didn't grow up in the church and you grew up in a family or in a culture that didn't go to church. Faith wasn't a big part of your life. And then at some point you found Jesus and you changed your allegiance to him and started following him and being part of the church, and it just felt like it alienated you from your family and friends that still didn't go, that still didn't have faith, that still didn't see that as important. I think today maybe one of the biggest things that that could cause this kind of identity shift is the pandemic. Because cultural changes can steal your identity right from under you. So perhaps it's because of the pandemic. Maybe it's caused you to lose your job or be furloughed. Maybe a loved one has contracted the virus and they are either not doing well or they died. Maybe the constant presence with people in your house and being stuck together all the time has exposed rifts in your relationship. I've had more than one pastor friend tell me that they're having to work with couples in their church that are either breaking up, that they've been talking for a while about getting married and now they're breaking up, or they've been married and now they're getting a divorce. Or maybe just the isolation is provoking difficult introspection and causing you to struggle with parts of yourself that you've been able to avoid up until now. But whatever the case, you're questioning what you used to know about the world around you or about yourself. Who am I now without my job or my parents or spouse, a child, friends? And what am I to do now? Maybe homeschooling has been hard, and so what am I to do now when I'm not the parent I thought I was? What am I to do now when our relationship wasn't as solid as I thought? What am I to do now when I don't believe the same things anymore? What am I to do now when my values have shifted so dramatically that I'm not in the same place? I don't feel like the same person I was before. Who am I? What am I to do? And it's into this insecurity comes the letter of 1 Peter. And standing in the face of that doubt and insecurity, Peter reminds them, that first century Christians, reminds them and us of where our true identity lies. Not in who we are, but that our true identity lies in whose we are. Struggling with the difficulties of working out your salvation? Then remember just how good your first taste of God was. Do you remember that? Do you remember the first time you experienced God and just got that tiny taste of Him, and how good that was? That was so good that it drew you in, that caused you to want to seek more of that. Well, cry out for more nourishment, that you will grow into the full experience. Wrecked by being rejected and ostracized? Remember Christ. He was rejected by people too. But He was chosen by God to be the living cornerstone. And Christ welcomes you with open arms, turning you into His spiritual house, calling you to a royal priesthood, and affirming your pleasure to God. Others may reject and ostracize you, but God finds you precious, and you give him great joy in being his. Feeling lost because your identity crumbled from beneath your feet when you lost the place where your identity was housed? Whether that was your family, your job, your position, your values, or your worldview. Jesus wants to tell you, you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's possession, called out of the darkness into marvelous light. God has an identity for you and for us. For once we had no identity. Now we are God's chosen people. Once we had not received mercy, but now we have received mercy. We can show the goodness of God to those who don't recognize it, who deny it, resist it, and fight it. To those still in the darkness, because we have been brought into the marvelous light and received God's mercy. So we will not fear changes, upheavals, or evolutions. The earth can continue spinning on its axis. The wheels of time can keep turning over and over and over. Methods and mediums can change over and back again. Cultural norms and values can be fixed or then become fluid and then become fixed again, but still different than they were before. Yet the one constant, the one foundation where we can find firm footing and to hold on to and rebuild everything else upon is that you and I are beloved children of God. Come hell or high water, come changing cultural tides, come shifting political allegiances, we are God's chosen people. Stable in God's love, grace, and mercy. We don't need to be afraid of the changes and the shifts that will come our way, because changes are coming. Changes about how we operate in the world, changes about how we interact with each other, changes about what our values and virtues are. Changes are coming. They're inescapable. But we don't have to fear the change, because at the end of the day, our identity isn't in what we do. Our identity isn't the people we hang out with. Our identity isn't in the job that we have or the role that we play. Our identity is found that God has chosen us as his people and has given us mercy. Before we knew to ask for it, he extended his grace to us. And we find our home, we find our sense of self in the grace and love of God. Everything else we do stands on that foundation. And so I encourage you to house your identity there. Let Christ be the cornerstone of the frame and the building of your identity. Don't put it anywhere else. Don't look to anything else for your identity, but house it in the life of Jesus Christ and in the love of God. House your identity there and never fear again. Thank you for being part of our online family. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell so you get notifications for any future videos or content. And feel free to please share with a friend. You can also follow us on Facebook or Instagram, and if you feel so inclined and would like to donate and support our ministry, please click the donate button found in the description. Thank you, and God bless you.